The insurance photos were spread across my kitchen table like evidence at a crime scene, each one a testament to what my 23-year-old daughter had stolen from me. The platinum band with its constellation of diamonds caught the overhead light in the photograph, every facet documented in crisp detail, carats, clarity, cut, all meticulously recorded for a policy I'd hoped never to use. My hands shook as I picked up the appraisal certificate dated just 6 months ago, the one that valued my late wife's wedding ring at $18,000. "Dad, I can explain." I couldn't look at Sarah, not yet. The pawn shop receipt in my other hand told a different story than whatever explanation she was about to offer. $47.30. That's what Mel's 20-year marriage had been reduced to in my daughter's moment of desperation. $47.30 at some sketchy place called Golden Triangle Pawn on the wrong side of Riverside Avenue. Explain what, exactly? My voice came out steadier than I felt. Explain how you asked to borrow your mother's ring for a date, and instead of returning it, you sold it for beer money. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Sarah stood in the doorway of my kitchen, still wearing that ridiculous vintage band t-shirt she'd probably paid more for than she got for the ring. Her dark hair, Mel's hair, fell across her face as she stared at the floor. 23 years old, and she still couldn't look me in the eye when she'd screwed up. It wasn't for beer money. Her voice was small, defeated. Then what? I set the photos down carefully, each movement deliberate. What was so important that you had to pawn the one thing I have left of your mother? That's when she started crying. Not the manipulative tears she'd used as a teenager to get out of trouble, but the raw, ugly sobbing of someone who'd hit bottom and just realized how far they'd fallen. She slumped against the doorframe, and for a moment she looked 12 again, crying because she'd scraped her knee or some kid at school had been mean to her. But she wasn't 12. She was a grown woman who'd violated my trust in the most fundamental way possible. I owe people money. The words came out between sobs. Bad people. And I thought I could get it back before you noticed. My stomach dropped. What kind of people? Just people. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand, a gesture so reminiscent of her mother that it physically hurt. I got in over my head with some gambling, and they said if I didn't pay them back by Friday. Gambling? I stood up from the kitchen table, my 52-year-old knees protesting. What gambling? You work at a coffee shop, Sarah. You make minimum wage. Online poker. Sports betting. It started small, but nothing. I walked to the window, needing distance from her, needing air. The view from my suburban Phoenix kitchen showed the same thing it had for 15 years. Manicured lawns, palm trees, houses that all looked basically the same. The American dream, Mel used to call it. Stability, security, a place to raise a family. A place where your daughter could grow up to steal from you. How much do you owe? Another long pause. $1,500. I turned back to face her. $1,500. You pawned an $18,000 ring for $47 to pay off $1,500 in gambling debt. I was going to get it back. I had a plan. You had a plan. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Let me guess. You are going to win big on your next bet and use the money to buy back the ring? The way her face crumpled told me I'd hit the mark. Jesus Christ, Sarah. I rubbed my temples where a headache was starting to build. Do you have any idea what that ring meant to me? What it represented? Of course I do. No, you don't. The words came out harder than I intended. Because if you did, you never would have taken it out of this house. That ring was the symbol of everything good in my life. 20 years of marriage to the most incredible woman I've ever known. The promise I made to love her until death do us part. A promise I kept even when she was dying of cancer. And there were days I wanted to run away from the smell of chemotherapy and the sound of her coughing up blood. Sarah flinched like I'd slapped her. That ring sat on her finger through every fight we ever had. every sleepless night with you when you were a baby, every financial struggle when I was trying to build my business. It was there when we bought this house, when we celebrated your high school graduation, when she held your hand during that panic attack you had your freshman year of college. I was pacing now, unable to stay still. The kitchen felt too small, too confining. And when she was dying, when she was so weak she could barely lift her head off the pillow, she took that ring off her finger and put it in my hand and made me promise to keep it safe, to pass it down to you when you were ready. Dad, please. She believed in you, Sarah. Even when you dropped out of college, even when you moved back home at 21 with no plan and no direction, even when you went through that phase where you blamed us for every problem in your life, she always said you'd figure it out, that you just needed time to find yourself. I stopped pacing and looked directly at my daughter. She was still crying, but silently now, tears streaming down her face. What do you think she'd say if she knew what you did? That's when Sarah collapsed. Not metaphorically, not emotionally. She literally crumpled to the kitchen floor like someone had cut her strings, her knees hitting the linoleum with a sound that made me winch. Her whole body shook as she sobbed, the kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep and primal.
I know what she'd say, Sarah managed between gasps. She'd say she was disappointed in me. She'd say I let her down. She'd say, her voice broke completely. She'd say I broke her heart. I stood there watching my daughter fall apart on my kitchen floor, and for the first time since I'd discovered what she'd done, I felt something other than rage. It was complicated, a mixture of heartbreak and frustration and love that I couldn't untangle. This was my baby girl, the little girl who used to crawl into bed between Mel and me during thunderstorms, the one who made me macaroni necklaces for Father's Day and told everyone who would listen that her daddy was the strongest man in the world, the teenager who came to me crying when her first boyfriend broke her heart, trusting that I could somehow fix it. But she was also the young woman who had stolen from me, who had taken the most precious thing I owned and traded it for less than $50, who had gambled away money she didn't have and then compounded the problem by violating my trust. I knelt down beside her on the kitchen floor. Up close, I could see how thin she'd gotten. When had that happened? Her cheekbones were more prominent than they should be, and there were dark circles under her eyes that I'd somehow missed. When did you last eat a real meal? She looked up at me, confused by the question. What? When did you last eat? Not coffee and whatever pastries they give you at work, an actual meal. I don't know. Yesterday? Maybe the day before. I closed my eyes. You spent your grocery money gambling. It wasn't a question. It wasn't, she whispered. I thought I could win it back, she whispered. I've been surviving on free coffee and day-old muffins from work. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that I'd hit a winning streak and everything would be fine. And the people you owe money to, who are they? I met them through this guy Derek who comes into the coffee shop. He said he knew people who could spot me some cash for betting, that it was no big deal as long as I paid them back within a reasonable time frame. Loan sharks. I guess. I didn't really think about it that way. Of course she didn't. Sarah had always been too trusting, too willing to believe that people had her best interests at heart. It was one of the things Mel and I had worried about when she was growing up. How do you teach your daughter to be cautious without making her cynical? What happens on Friday? Sarah's face went pale. They said they'd find other ways for me to pay off the debt. The implication hung in the air between us, ugly and threatening.
I felt a familiar surge of protective anger, the same feeling I'd had when some kid pushed her off the swings in second grade, or when her high school boyfriend had pressured her to do things she wasn't ready for. "We're going to fix this," I said. "Dad, you don't understand." "No, you don't understand." I stood up and walked back to the table where the insurance photos were still spread out. I'm not going to let some thugs hurt my daughter because she made a stupid mistake. It's not just a mistake, Dad. I have a problem, a real problem. Sarah pulled herself up from the floor and sat heavily in one of the kitchen chairs. I can't stop betting. Even when I'm losing, even when I know I should quit, I keep thinking the next hand will be the one that turns everything around. The admission hung between us. In all the years since Mel died, Sarah and I had danced around a lot of issues. Her lack of direction, her tendency to drift from job to job, her apparent inability to form lasting relationships. But we'd never talked about addiction. That word had never been spoken aloud in this house. When did it start? About 6 months after Mom died. I was so angry all the time, and sad, and I didn't know what to do with all these feelings. Someone at work mentioned this poker app, said it was a good way to blow off steam. I started with $5 games. 2.5 years ago. Sarah had been struggling with gambling addiction for 2.5 years, and I'd been completely oblivious. Why didn't you tell me? Tell you what? That your daughter is a degenerate gambler who can't even manage her own life? That I was using poker to try to fill the hole Mom left behind? She laughed bitterly. You were already dealing with enough. That stung because it was partially true. After Mel died, I'd thrown myself into work with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Building my consulting business became my way of coping, of having something to focus on other than the empty house and the empty bed, and the way everything reminded me of her. I'd assumed Sarah was handling her grief in her own way, that she needed space to figure things out. Instead, she'd been drowning, and I'd been too wrapped up in my own pain to notice. I should have seen it, I said, more to myself than to her. You couldn't have known. I got good at hiding it. And it's not your fault anyway. I'm an adult. I made these choices. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw Mel's eyes staring back at me. The same green eyes that had captivated me when I met her at a college party 25 years ago. The same eyes that had looked at me with such love and trust when Sarah was born. The same eyes that had pleaded with me to take care of our baby girl during those final terrible weeks. We're going to get you help, I said, real help. But first, we need to deal with these people you owe money to. Dad, you can't just pay them off. It doesn't work that way. Why not? Because then I'll owe you $1,500 instead of them, and I'll still have the same problem that got me into this mess in the first place. Sarah was right, and I knew it. But the thought of these loan sharks, these predators who targeted vulnerable people like my daughter, made my blood pressure spike. I'd spent my entire adult life trying to shield her from the worst parts of the world, and here she was, caught up in something that could genuinely hurt her. So what do you suggest? I need to go to rehab, like actual gambling addiction treatment, and I need to get a better job so I can pay you back for whatever this is going to cost. She gestured at the insurance photos. I know the ring is gone. I know I probably can't get it back, but I need to try to make this right somehow. I picked up the pawn shop receipt again. Actually, we might be able to get it back. What do you mean? Arizona law gives you 30 days to redeem pawned items. It's been, I checked the date on the receipt, 12 days. If we can come up with the money to cover what they gave you plus their fees and interest, the ring should still be there. Hope flickered across Sarah's face, then died just as quickly. Dad, you don't have that kind of money just lying around. She was wrong about that, but I didn't correct her. The truth was, the consulting business had been more successful than I'd let on to anyone, including Sarah. After Mel died, I'd thrown myself into work, partly because I didn't know what else to do with my life, but also because staying busy kept me from dwelling on how empty the house felt. The result was that I'd built a thriving business and had more money in savings than I'd ever had before. But that wasn't really the point. "Let me worry about the money," I said. "The question is whether you're serious about getting help." "I am. I'm so tired of living like this, Dad. I'm tired of lying and stealing and disappointing everyone who cares about me. I'm tired of being the family screw-up." "You're not a screw-up. You're sick. There's a difference." Sarah looked at me with surprise. "You really believe that?" "I believe addiction is a disease, not a moral failing. I believe you can get better with the right help. And I believe your mother would want me to do everything in my power to help you recover." We sat in silence for a few minutes, both of us absorbing the weight of what had been said. The kitchen clock ticked steadily, marking time in a way that felt both monotonous and precious. How many conversations had Mel and I had in this same kitchen? How many family dinners had we shared around this table? How many homework sessions and heart-to-heart talks and mundane discussions about schedules and grocery lists? This house held so many memories, most of them good. But today felt different. Today felt like a turning point, though I wasn't entirely sure which direction we were turning. "What happens now?" Sarah asked. "Now we make a plan. First, we get the ring back. Then we deal with these people you owe money to. Then we get you into treatment. In that order?" "In that order." Sarah nodded slowly. "And if I screw up again? If I relapse or can't stay clean or—" "Then we'll figure it out. Together." I reached across the table and took her hand.
It was smaller than I remembered, more fragile. "I'm not going anywhere, Sarah. Even when you make mistakes, even when you make big, awful mistakes like this one, I'm still your father. That doesn't change." Tears started flowing again, but these felt different, cleaner somehow. "I love you, Dad, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "I know you are, and I love you too." The next few hours passed in a blur of phone calls and research. I called my insurance agent to report the theft and start the claims process, though I made it clear I hoped to recover the ring before that became necessary. Sarah called in sick to work, which was probably for the best given her emotional state and the fact that she looked like she hadn't slept in days. We spent time online researching gambling addiction treatment programs in Arizona. The options were overwhelming. Inpatient facilities, outpatient programs, support groups, individual therapy. Some were covered by insurance, others weren't. Some had waiting lists, others could start immediately. "This one looks good," Sarah said, pointing to a program at a behavioral health center about 20 minutes away. "It's outpatient, so I could keep working. And they have group therapy sessions specifically for people with gambling addictions." I read over the program description. It was comprehensive. Individual counseling, group therapy, financial planning assistance, family therapy sessions. The kind of support system Sarah needed to address not just the symptoms of her addiction, but the underlying issues that had led to it. "When can you start?" "They have an intake appointment available tomorrow morning." "Then that's what we'll do." The loan shark situation was more complicated. Sarah gave me Derek's phone number, the guy from the coffee shop who had introduced her to these people. But when I called, his voicemail was full. She didn't have direct contact information for the people she owed money to, which meant Derek was the intermediary. "I don't like this," I said. "The whole thing feels deliberately vague." "That's probably the point. They don't want there to be a paper trail." We drove to Sarah's coffee shop, a locally owned place called The Daily Grind in downtown Phoenix. It was the kind of hipster establishment that served $12 coffee drinks and featured local art on the walls. Sarah had been working there for about 8 months, the longest she'd held any job since dropping out of college. Derek wasn't there, but the manager, a woman named Lisa with purple hair and multiple piercings, knew him. "Derek comes in every couple of days, usually around 3 in the afternoon," she told us. "He's one of our regulars. Why? Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," I said, though we both knew that was a lie. "We just need to talk to him about something. I can give him a message if you want." Sarah and I exchanged glances.
How do you ask someone to pass along a message about illegal gambling debts? Just tell him Sarah needs to talk to him as soon as possible, I said finally. It's important. We left the coffee shop and drove to Golden Triangle Pawn, a depressing storefront in a strip mall that had seen better days. The neighborhood wasn't dangerous exactly, but it definitely wasn't somewhere I'd want to be alone after dark. Half the businesses in the strip mall were vacant, their windows covered with brown paper. The ones that were still operating, a check-cashing place, a discount tobacco store, a restaurant with signs in Spanish, all had security bars on their windows. Inside the pawn shop, a middle-aged man with a gray ponytail sat behind bulletproof glass reading a paperback novel. The shop itself was cramped and cluttered, every surface covered with items that represented someone else's desperation: musical instruments, power tools, jewelry, electronics, sporting goods. Help you folks? I slid the pawn ticket through the opening in the glass. I'm here about this ring. He took the ticket and walked to a computer terminal, pecking at the keys with 2 fingers. Yep, still here. Platinum band with diamonds. Pretty nice piece. He looked up at Sarah. You the one who brought it in? I am. Change your mind? Something like that. He did some more pecking at the computer. Okay, you got 18 days left on the redemption period. You want it back? It's going to cost you $73.45. The markup was outrageous, more than 50% on top of what they'd given Sarah, but I'd expected that. Well, take it. You got ID? Has to be the same person who pawned it. Sarah handed over her driver's license. The man compared it to something on his computer screen, then disappeared into a back room. A few minutes later, he returned with a small plastic bag containing Mel's ring. I felt a surge of relief so intense it was almost physical. The ring was safe. Whatever else happened, I had recovered the one tangible piece of my wife that I couldn't replace. The man counted my cash twice before handing over the bag and a receipt. Pleasure doing business with you folks. Outside in the parking lot, I handed the bag to Sarah. You should be the one to give this back to me. She looked confused. What? Take it out of the bag and put it back where it belongs. Sarah's hands shook as she opened the plastic bag and removed the ring. It looked smaller somehow, diminished by its brief captivity in that awful place. But the diamonds still caught the Arizona sunlight, and the platinum still gleamed with the luster that had drawn Mel to it all those years ago. I don't deserve to touch this, Sarah whispered. Maybe not, but you're going to do it anyway, because part of making amends is doing the right thing, even when you don't feel worthy of redemption. Sarah held the ring for a long moment, turning it over in her palm. Then she took my left hand and slid it onto my ring finger next to the simple gold band I'd worn for 20 years. I'm sorry, Mom, she said quietly. I'm going to do better, I promise. We drove home in relative silence, both lost in our own thoughts. The ring felt strange on my finger. I'd worn it only a few times since Mel died, usually to formal events where I thought she would have wanted me to wear it. Most of the time, it stayed in the jewelry box on my dresser, too precious and too painful to have on my person every day. But today felt different. Today, it felt right to have it with me. Back home, my phone was ringing as we walked through the front door. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but when I answered, the voice on the other end was familiar. Mr. Martinez? This is Lisa from the Daily Grind. Derek just came in and I gave him your message. He wants to talk to you. Put him on. There was a brief pause, then a male voice came on the line. This is Derek. Lisa said you needed to talk to me about Sarah? That's right. We need to discuss the people she owes money to. Look, man, I don't know what Sarah told you, but I'm just a customer at the coffee shop. I don't have anything to do with her personal business. Cut the crap, Derek. We know you introduced her to some people who lend money for gambling. She owes them $1,500, and they're threatening her. Another pause, longer this time. You wearing a wire or something? I'm a father trying to protect his daughter, that's all. Meet me at the Circle K on Indian School Road in an hour. Come alone. The line went dead. Absolutely not, Sarah said when I told her about the conversation. "You are not meeting some random guy at a gas station to discuss illegal gambling debts. That's how people get hurt. I'll be fine." "Dad, you don't understand how these people operate. They're not reasonable businessmen who are going to negotiate in good faith. They're criminals." "Which is exactly why I need to handle this, not you." We argued about it for 20 minutes, but in the end, I won. Partly because I was more stubborn, and partly because Sarah knew she didn't have any better options. The plan was simple. I would meet Derek, find out who Sarah owed money to, and arrange to pay off the debt. Sarah would stay home and continue researching treatment programs. The Circle K was one of those generic gas station convenience stores that dot Phoenix like acne, brightly lit, selling overpriced snacks and energy drinks to a steady stream of commuters and travelers. I pulled into the parking lot 5 minutes early and waited, watching the flow of customers coming and going. Derek turned out to be younger than I'd expected, maybe 25 or 26, with the kind of carefully cultivated stubble that required more maintenance than being clean-shaven. He was tall and thin, wearing jeans and a polo shirt that looked expensive. He drove a BMW that was probably 3 years old, but well-maintained. Not exactly the hardened criminal I'd been imagining. "You Mr. Martinez?" he asked, walking up to my car. "That's me. Let's walk." We strolled toward the back of the building, away from the main flow of traffic. Derek seemed nervous, constantly looking around as if he expected to be followed. "Look, I want to make something clear," he said. "I never told Sarah to bet money she didn't have. I never told her to dig herself into a hole. I just introduced her to some people, that's all." "What kind of people?" "People who provide financial services to individuals who might not qualify for traditional bank loans." "Loan sharks." Derek winced. "I prefer to think of them as alternative lending specialists." "What's the difference?" "The difference is that traditional loan sharks break kneecaps when you don't pay them back. These people are more creative." I didn't like the sound of that. What does creative mean? "It means they find other ways for people to work off their debts. Sarah's an attractive young woman with a college education. There are lots of opportunities for someone like her to earn money quickly." The implication hit me like a punch to the gut. Are you talking about prostitution? I'm talking about the service industry. Hostessing, bartending, entertainment. Perfectly legal ways to make good money with flexible hours. Hostessing and bartending jobs don't require you to work off gambling debts to loan sharks. Derek shrugged. "Look, man, I'm just the middleman here. I connect people who need money with people who have money to lend. What happens after that is between them." "I want to pay off my daughter's debt." "It doesn't work that way." "Why not?" "Because the debt is in her name, not yours. These people don't know you, don't trust you. For all they know, you could be a cop trying to set up a sting operation." "I'm not a cop. I'm a father trying to help his daughter." "Yeah, well, you'll have to prove that." Derek pulled out his phone and sent a text message. A few minutes later, his phone buzzed with a response. "Okay, they'll meet with you, but it has to be both of you, you and Sarah. Tonight, 8 o'clock, at a restaurant called Rosa's Kitchen on 7th Avenue. "What kind of restaurant?" "The kind where they serve food and you eat it." Jesus, what kind of question is that? I looked up Rosa's Kitchen on my phone. It was a small Mexican restaurant in central Phoenix, the kind of family-owned place that had been serving the same recipes for 30 years. According to the reviews, the food was excellent and the atmosphere was casual and welcoming. Not exactly the kind of place I'd expect to conduct business with loan sharks. Why there? Because it's public, it's neutral, and Maria makes the best carnitas in Phoenix. Derek started walking back toward his BMW. 8 o'clock sharp. Don't be late and don't bring any surprises.
What kind of surprises? Cops, recording devices, weapons, backup. Just you and your daughter having dinner with some friends. He drove away, leaving me standing in the parking lot of a gas station, wondering what the hell I'd gotten myself into.
Back home, Sarah was less than thrilled about the meeting. Rosa's Kitchen? I know that place. It's actually really good, but why would they want to meet there? Derek said it was neutral ground. Or it's a place where they feel comfortable, which means they probably do business there regularly. We spent the rest of the afternoon preparing for the meeting. Sarah wanted to bring cash to pay off the entire debt, but I vetoed that idea. Showing up with $1,500 in cash seemed like a good way to get robbed. Instead, we'd negotiate terms and payment methods if they agreed to accept payment from me. At 7:30, we drove to Rosa's Kitchen. It was located in a strip mall, but a nicer one than where the pawn shop had been. The restaurant itself was small and cozy, with maybe 15 tables and walls covered with family photos and Mexican folk art. The smell of cumin and cilantro filled the air, and I could hear the sizzle of meat on a grill. "Mr. Martinez?" I turned to see a woman approaching our table. She was maybe 45, well-dressed in a business suit with graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. She looked like a bank manager or a real estate agent, not a loan shark. "I'm Carmen Rodriguez," she said, extending her hand. "And you must be Sarah." We shook hands and she sat down across from us. A moment later, a man joined us, younger than Carmen, maybe 35, wearing jeans and a button-down shirt. He had the build of someone who worked out regularly, but his manner was polite and professional. "This is my colleague, Mike," Carmen said. "We understand you'd like to discuss Sarah's account." "I'd like to pay off her debt," I said directly. Carmen smiled. "I appreciate that, Mr. Martinez. You're obviously a caring father. But Sarah is an adult who entered into this agreement on her own. We can't simply transfer her obligations to a third party." "Why not? Money is money." "Because our business is built on relationships and trust. We need to know that the people we work with are reliable, that they understand the terms of our agreements, and that they have the means to honor their commitments." "I have the means." "I'm sure you do, but that's not really the point." The waitress came by and took our orders. Carmen ordered the carnitas Derek had mentioned. Mike got chicken enchiladas, and Sarah and I both ordered combination plates. The normalcy of ordering dinner felt surreal given the circumstances. "Let me explain how this works," Carmen said once the waitress had left. Sarah borrowed $1,500 to place bets on sporting events. The terms were simple: pay back the principal plus 20% interest within 30 days. That payment was due yesterday. "I tried to pay," Sarah said quietly, "but I lost the money I was planning to use." "We know, which is why we're willing to work out alternative arrangements." "What kind of arrangements?" I asked. Mike spoke for the first time. "Sarah has skills and education that could be valuable in various business contexts. We're prepared to offer her employment opportunities that would allow her to work off the debt over time." "What kind of employment opportunities?" "Customer service, hospitality, entertainment. The specifics would depend on her interests and availability." "And if she's not interested in those opportunities?" Carmen's smile never wavered, but something cold flickered in her eyes. "Then we'd have to explore other options for debt recovery." The food arrived, and we ate in relative silence for a few minutes. The carnitas were excellent, as Derek had promised, but I barely tasted them. My mind was racing, trying to figure out how to get Sarah out of this situation without making things worse. "What if I offered to pay double what she owes?" I said finally. "That's generous," Carmen replied, "but it's not about the money." "Everything is about the money." "Not everything. Sometimes it's about respect. Sometimes it's about setting an example for other clients who might be tempted to default on their obligations." I looked at Mike, who had been quietly eating his enchiladas. "What do you think?" "I think your daughter made a commitment she couldn't keep, and now she needs to face the consequences of that choice. She's getting help for her gambling problem. She's going into treatment." "That's admirable," Carmen said, "and we support people who are trying to improve their lives. But that doesn't erase her existing debt." I felt a surge of frustration. These people were being polite and reasonable on the surface, but underneath the civility was an unmistakable threat. They weren't going to let Sarah walk away from this debt regardless of what I offered to pay. "What exactly are you proposing?" Sarah asked. "We have several business associates who are always looking for reliable employees," Mike said. "Restaurants, clubs, event planning companies. The work is legitimate, but it pays well and offers flexible scheduling." "How much would I earn?" "Enough to pay off your debt within 3 to 6 months, depending on how many hours you're willing to work." "And if I say no?" Carmen set down her fork and looked directly at Sarah. "Then we'd have to consider other methods of debt collection. Methods that might involve your family, your employment, your credit rating. We're reasonable people, Sarah, but we're also business people. We can't afford to let people default on their obligations without consequences." "I'd heard enough. I'll give you $3,000, cash, tomorrow morning. In exchange, Sarah's debt is forgiven and you leave her alone." "Mr. Martinez," Carmen started. "$5,000. Final offer."
Carmen and Mike exchanged glances. Some silent communication passed between them, the kind of wordless conversation that only comes from working closely together for a long time. "We appreciate your offer," Carmen said finally, "but we need to discuss this with our associates. Can we meet again tomorrow evening?" "Where?" "Here works fine. Same time." They paid for their meals and left, declining our offer to pick up the check. Sarah and I sat in the restaurant for another 20 minutes, both lost in thought. "They're going to say no," Sarah said finally. "Why?" "Because they don't just want the money. They want me, for whatever these employment opportunities are." She made air quotes around the phrase. "I think Mike was right about one thing. This is about setting an example." "An example of what?" "That they can get to anyone, even middle-class college graduates with supportive families. It makes other people more afraid to cross them." I thought about what Sarah had said as we drove home. She was probably right. These people weren't just loan sharks. They were running a more sophisticated operation that preyed on vulnerable people and used fear and intimidation to maintain control. The question was, what were we going to do about it? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, turning the problem over in my mind like a Rubik's Cube, looking for the combination that would solve everything. Every scenario I imagined ended badly. If we freed them off, they'd just find another way to exploit Sarah. If we refused to pay, they'd escalate their threats. If we went to the police, it would be our word against theirs, and Carmen and Mike had been careful not to say anything explicitly threatening. Around 2 in the morning, I got up and went to my home office. I'd built a successful consulting business by solving complex problems for other people. Surely I could figure out how to solve this one for my own family. I spent the next 3 hours researching everything I could find about loan sharking, debt collection, and predatory lending in Arizona. What I found wasn't encouraging. These operations were often sophisticated and well-connected, with legitimate business fronts and lawyers who knew how to walk right up to the line of legality without crossing it. But I also found something else: stories of people who had successfully fought back. Victims who had documented the threats, gathered evidence, and worked with law enforcement to shut down these operations. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't without risk, but it was possible. By morning, I had the outline of a plan. "You want to do what?" Sarah said when I explained it to her over breakfast. "I want to record tonight's meeting, get them to make specific threats on tape. Then we take it to the FBI." "Dad, that's insane. What if they find the recording device? What if they search us before we sit down?" "Then we'll deal with that when it happens."
"And what if they hurt us?" I looked at my daughter across the kitchen table, the same table where we'd had this conversation yesterday, where we'd spread out the insurance photos of her mother's ring like evidence at a trial. She looked better today, more rested, though the dark circles under her eyes would probably take weeks to fade completely. "Sarah, I've been thinking about this all night. These people aren't going away. Even if we pay them off, even if you work for them, They'll always have something to hold over your head. The only way to end this is to put them out of business. Or get ourselves killed trying. They're not going to kill us in a public restaurant. No, but they might kill us later, in a private location, after they figure out what we're up to. Sarah had a point, but I was past caring about the risks. The thought of my daughter working for these people, of whatever employment opportunities they had in mind, made my stomach turn. I'd failed to protect her from her addiction, failed to notice when she was struggling, failed to be the father she needed when her mother died. I wasn't going to fail her again. "I'm not going to let you," I said simply. "Dad?" "No arguments. We're going to end this tonight." I spent the day making preparations. First, I went to an electronics store and bought the smallest digital recording device I could find, something that would fit in my shirt pocket without being obvious. Then I called my lawyer and explained the situation, asking him to be on standby in case we needed legal help quickly. Finally, I did something I should have done years ago. I called Sarah's college roommate, Jessica, who had been her best friend before the gambling addiction took over her life. "Mr. Martinez, is everything okay? Is Sarah all right?" "She's fine, but she's going through a difficult time. I was wondering if you might want to come for dinner tonight." "Of course. I've been worried about her. We used to talk all the time, but lately," Jessica's voice trailed off. "Lately, she's been dealing with some personal issues, but she's getting help now, and I think it would mean a lot to her to see you. We arranged for Jessica to come to the house at 6 o'clock. That would give her and Sarah time to reconnect before we had to leave for our meeting with Carmen and Mike." When Jessica arrived, Sarah's face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months. The two of them hugged for a long time, and I could see tears in both their eyes. "I'm sorry I've been such a terrible friend," Sarah said. "I know I've been distant and weird, and I never returned your calls." "Are you kidding? You don't have to apologize for anything. I just missed you." They spent an hour catching up, talking about mutual friends and jobs and all the normal things that 23-year-olds talk about.
Watching them together reminded me of how isolated Sarah had become, how addiction had slowly stripped away all the relationships that used to sustain her. At 7:15, I pulled Sarah aside. "I need you to stay here with Jessica tonight." "What? No, we agreed I was coming with you." I changed my mind. "This is too dangerous." "Dad, they specifically said both of us had to be there. If you show up alone, they're going to know something's wrong." She was right, but I still didn't like it. The thought of putting Sarah in danger made every protective instinct I had go into overdrive. "Fine, but if anything goes wrong, anything at all, I want you to run. Don't worry about me, don't try to be a hero, just get out of there and call 911. Nothing's going to go wrong. Promise me, Sarah." "I promise." Rosa's kitchen was busier than it had been the night before. Almost every table was occupied, and there was a line of people waiting to be seated. The noise level was higher too, conversations and laughter mixing with the sounds from the kitchen. Carmen and Mike were already there, sitting at the same table we'd used the previous evening. They stood up and shook hands as we approached, the picture of politeness. "Mr. Martinez, Sarah, thank you for coming." We sat down and ordered drinks, iced tea for everyone. The waitress asked if we wanted to hear the specials, but Carmen waved her off. "We'll need a few minutes to look at the menu." Once the waitress was gone, Carmen got straight to business. "We've considered your offer, Mr. Martinez, and while we appreciate your generosity, we're not able to accept it." "Why not?" "Because it sets a bad precedent. If word gets out that family members can simply pay off gambling debts, it undermines the entire structure of our business." I felt the recording device in my shirt pocket, a small weight against my chest. "So what are you proposing?" "Sarah works for us until her debt is paid off. The employment opportunities Mike mentioned yesterday are real and legitimate. She'd be working in customer service and hospitality." "What specifically would I be doing?" Sarah asked. Mike leaned forward. "We have business relationships with several upscale establishments in Scottsdale and Phoenix. Private clubs, restaurants, event venues. They're always looking for attractive, educated young women to work as hostesses and customer service representatives." "That sounds reasonable," I said, trying to draw them out.
It is reasonable, Carmen replied. Sarah would earn enough to pay off her debt within 4 to 6 months, assuming she's willing to work nights and weekends. And if she's not willing, then we'd have to consider other options. Carmen's smile never wavered, but her voice took on a harder edge. Well, there are always collection agencies, and then there are more personal approaches to debt recovery.
Personal approaches? Sometimes people need motivation to honor their commitments. That motivation can come in various forms. I felt my pulse quicken. Are you threatening my daughter? I'm explaining the reality of the situation. Sarah borrowed money she couldn't repay. That has consequences. What kind of consequences? Mike spoke up. The kind where people learn that actions have results, where family members learn that their loved one's poor choices affect everyone around them. You're talking about threatening her family. I'm talking about the natural consequences of defaulting on a financial obligation. Carmen placed her hand on the table, her fingers drumming silently against the wood. Mr. Martinez, you seem like a reasonable man, a successful businessman. Surely you understand that we can't simply write off debts because people change their minds about paying them back. I understand that you're threatening my daughter. I'm offering your daughter employment. And if she refuses this employment, then we'd have to explore other collection methods. The recording device felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket. I needed them to be more specific, more explicit about their threats. What other collection methods? Carmen and Mike exchanged another one of their silent looks. When Carmen spoke again, her voice was deliberately casual. Well, there's always the possibility of garnishing wages, though that requires going through the courts. There's also the option of contacting employers, landlords, family members. People tend to be more motivated to pay their debts when their support systems are aware of their financial irresponsibility. You're talking about harassment. I'm talking about standard debt collection practices. And if that doesn't work, then we get creative. Creative how? Mike leaned back in his chair, studying me with cold eyes. Creative in ways that might be unpleasant for everyone involved. Are you threatening violence? I'm not threatening anything, Mr. Martinez. I'm simply explaining that people who don't honor their commitments sometimes find themselves in difficult situations. What kind of difficult situations? The kind where accidents happen, where people get hurt, where family members learn that their loved one's poor choices have far-reaching consequences. There it was. Not explicit enough for a court of law, but clear enough for anyone listening to understand what they meant. So you're saying if Sarah doesn't work for you, you'll hurt her or hurt her family? Carmen's smile finally faded. I'm saying that Sarah needs to honor her commitment. How she chooses to do that is up to her. And if I try to pay off her debt, then you'd be interfering with our business relationship with Sarah. That would create complications. What kind of complications? The kind where well-meaning fathers learn that protecting their children sometimes puts them in danger themselves. Mike leaned forward again. Mr. Martinez, you strike me as a smart guy. Smart enough to recognize when he's in over his head. Smart enough to know when to step back and let his daughter handle her own problems. And if I'm not that smart, then you might find yourself learning some painful lessons about the consequences of meddling in other people's business. I looked at Sarah, who had gone pale during this exchange. She was staring at the table, her hands clenched in her lap. Give us a minute to discuss this, I said. Of course, take all the time you need. Carmen and Mike got up and walked toward the bar area, leaving Sarah and me alone at the table. Did you get all that? I whispered. Sarah nodded. They basically just threatened to hurt both of us if I don't work for them. And if I try to interfere. Dad, maybe we should just… No, we're not giving in to these people. Carmen and Mike returned to the table a few minutes later. Have you reached a decision? Carmen asked. We have, I said. Sarah is going into treatment for her gambling addiction. She's not going to work for you, and I'm going to pay off her debt. If you have a problem with that, you can take it up with the authorities. Carmen's expression didn't change, but Mike's jaw tightened. That's unfortunate, Carmen said.
We were hoping to resolve this amicably. We were being amicable. You were being threatening. I think there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. You threatened to hurt my daughter if she didn't work for you. You threatened to hurt me if I interfered. That's extortion. Mike started to stand up, but Carmen put a restraining hand on his arm. Mr. Martinez, I think you've misinterpreted our conversation. We were simply explaining the business realities of debt collection. I know exactly what you were doing. Perhaps we should schedule another meeting when everyone has had time to cool down and think more clearly. There won't be another meeting. Carmen reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. In case you change your mind. She placed the card on the table and stood up. Mike followed her lead, but not before giving both Sarah and me a long, hard look. It was a pleasure meeting you both, Carmen said. I hope you'll reconsider our offer. They left money on the table for their drinks and walked out of the restaurant, leaving Sarah and me sitting there in stunned silence. Do you think we got enough? Sarah asked. I think we got plenty. We paid our check and drove home without talking much. The recording device in my pocket felt heavier now, weighted with the implications of what we'd captured. These people had essentially confessed to running an extortion racket, and we had it all on tape. Back at the house, Jessica was waiting in the living room, watching TV and eating ice cream. How did dinner go? She asked. It was interesting, I said. Sarah will fill you in.
I need to make some phone calls. I went to my home office and called the FBI field office in Phoenix. After being transferred 3 times, I finally reached an agent named David Chen who specialized in organized crime and racketeering. I'd like to report an extortion scheme, I said. What kind of extortion scheme? I explained the situation, from Sarah's gambling addiction to the threats we'd received at dinner. Agent Chen listened without interrupting, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Do you have any evidence of these threats? I have a recording of tonight's conversation. You recorded them without their knowledge? Yes. Is that a problem? Not in Arizona. We're a one-party consent state, which means as long as one person in the conversation consents to the recording, in this case you, it's legal. So you can use it? Potentially. I'd need to hear it first, evaluate the quality and content. Can you bring it in tomorrow morning? Absolutely. And, Mr. Martinez, until we have a chance to investigate this, I'd recommend that you and your daughter be very careful. If these people are as sophisticated as they sound, they might not take kindly to being recorded. I hung up the phone feeling both relieved and terrified. We'd taken the first step towards stopping Carmen and Mike, but Agent Chen was right. We were potentially in more danger now than we'd been before. I found Sarah and Jessica in the kitchen, where Sarah was telling her friend about everything that had happened over the past few days. Jessica looked stunned. Sarah, this is insane. You could have been seriously hurt. I know, but it's over now. Dad recorded everything and we're going to turn it over to the FBI tomorrow. What if they come after you? They won't, I said, though I wasn't entirely convinced of that myself. They're too smart to do anything that would draw attention to their operation. As long as we stay in public places and don't do anything stupid, we should be fine. Jessica stayed the night, sleeping in Sarah's room like they were teenagers again. I stayed up late, sitting in my living room with all the lights on, listening for cars in the driveway or footsteps on the front porch. Every sound made me jump. The ice maker in the refrigerator, the settling of the house, the neighbor's dog barking at something in the night. Around 3 in the morning, I finally fell asleep in my recliner, still fully dressed. I woke up to the smell of coffee and the sound of voices in the kitchen. Sarah and Jessica were making breakfast, talking quietly about college friends and job prospects and all the normal things that people their age worried about. "Morning, Dad," Sarah said when I appeared in the doorway. "Coffee's ready." "Thanks." I poured myself a cup and checked my phone. No missed calls, no threatening text messages. Maybe we really were going to be okay. At 9 o'clock, Sarah and I drove to the FBI field office, a nondescript government building in downtown Phoenix. Agent Chen turned out to be younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with the kind of serious demeanor that suggested he'd seen too much in his career. We sat in a small conference room while he listened to the recording on a high-quality playback system. He stopped it several times to replay certain sections, taking notes on a legal pad.
"This is good," he said when it was finished. "Not perfect, but good. They were careful not to be too explicit, but the implication is clear enough." "So, you can arrest them?" "It's not that simple. This recording gives us probable cause to open an investigation, but we'll need more evidence to build a case that will hold up in court." "What kind of evidence?" "Financial records, witness testimony, evidence of other victims. These people are almost certainly running a larger operation than just your daughter's case." "How long will that take?" "Weeks, maybe months. These investigations don't happen overnight." I felt my heart sink. "What about Sarah's safety in the meantime?" "We can offer some protection, but our resources are limited. The best thing you can do is stay alert, vary your routines, and report any suspicious activity immediately." Agent Chen gave us his business card and a direct phone number where we could reach him 24 hours a day. He also gave us a list of precautions to take, things like checking our cars before getting in them, being aware of our surroundings, and not following predictable patterns. "There is one more thing," he said as we were leaving. "We'd like your permission to set up surveillance on your house and your daughter's workplace, just to make sure these people don't try anything." "Of course." "And if they contact you again, any form of contact at all, call me immediately. Don't try to handle it yourselves." We drove home feeling like we'd accomplished something important, but also like we'd painted targets on our backs. The FBI was investigating, but investigations took time, and Carmen and Mike were still out there. That afternoon, Sarah started her treatment program at the Behavioral Health Center. I drove her to the intake appointment and sat in the waiting room while she met with a counselor for 2 hours. When she came out, she looked emotionally drained but oddly hopeful. "How did it go?" I asked. "Hard, really hard, but good, I think. Dr. Patterson, she's my counselor, says recovery is going to be a long process, but she thinks I have a good chance if I'm willing to do the work." "Are you willing?" "I am. For the first time in 2 years, I actually believe I can get better." We stopped for lunch on the way home, choosing a busy restaurant where we could sit with our backs to the wall and watch the entrance. I was probably being paranoid, but Agent Chen's warnings about staying alert had made me hyper-aware of everything around us. The next few days passed without incident. Sarah went to work at the coffee shop and attended her treatment sessions. I tried to focus on my consulting business, though I found it hard to concentrate on client problems when I was constantly wondering if Carmen and Mike were planning some kind of retaliation. On Thursday morning, the phone rang while I was having breakfast. The caller ID showed an unknown number. "Hello? Mr. Martinez? This is Carmen Rodriguez. I think we need to talk." My blood ran cold. "I told you we had nothing more to discuss. I'm afraid there's been a development that changes things. Is Sarah there with you?" "What kind of development?" "The kind that requires a face-to-face conversation. Can you meet me at Rosa's kitchen in an hour?" "I'm not meeting you anywhere. Mr. Martinez, I strongly suggest you reconsider. This involves information about your daughter that I think you'll want to hear." "What information?" "The kind that's better discussed in person. 1 hour, Mr. Martinez. Come alone this time." The line went dead. I immediately called Agent Chen, but his phone went straight to voicemail. I left a message explaining what had happened and asking him to call me back as soon as possible. Then I called Sarah at work. "Dad, what's wrong?" "Carmen just called. She wants to meet me at Rosa's kitchen." "You're not going, right?" "I don't know. She said she had information about you that I needed to hear." "Dad, it's obviously a trap. Don't go." "But what if it's not? What if something has happened that we need to know about?" Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Then let the FBI handle it. Call Agent Chen." "I already did. He's not answering." "Then wait until he calls you back." She said 1 hour. If I don't show up, who knows what they might do? "Dad, please, don't do this." But I was already making up my mind. These people had threatened my daughter, had tried to force her into some kind of indentured servitude to pay off a gambling debt. I wasn't going to let them intimidate us with mysterious phone calls and vague threats. "I'm going," I said, "but I'm going to take precautions." "What kind of precautions?" "I'm going to bring backup." I called my brother-in-law, Tony, who lived about 20 minutes away in Tempe. Tony was a retired Marine who had served 2 tours in Afghanistan and now worked as a security consultant. If anyone could handle themselves in a potentially dangerous situation, it was Tony. "Mike, what's going on?" I explained the situation quickly, hitting the highlights of Sarah's gambling problem and our confrontation with the loan sharks. "Jesus, Mike, why didn't you call me sooner?" "Because I thought we could handle it ourselves." Famous last words. "Look, I can be there in 15 minutes. Don't go anywhere until I get there." Carmen said to come alone. Carmen can go to hell. You're not walking into a potential ambush by yourself.
Tony arrived at my house in 12 minutes, driving his pickup truck and carrying a concealed weapon that he was licensed to carry. He was a big man, 6'2" and solid muscle, with the kind of presence that made people think twice about starting trouble. "So, what's the plan?" he asked. "I go in and see what Carmen wants. You stay outside and watch the exits. If something goes wrong, call 911. What if something goes really wrong? Then use your judgment." We drove to Rosa's kitchen in separate vehicles. Tony parked across the street where he had a clear view of the entrance, while I went inside. Carmen was sitting at the same table we'd used for our previous meetings. She was alone this time. No sign of Mike or anyone else who might be working with her. "Mr. Martinez, thank you for coming. What do you want, Carmen?" "I want to make you an offer." "I'm listening." "We've done some research on you since our last conversation. Apparently, you're quite successful. Your consulting business generates substantial revenue. You own your home outright, and you have considerable savings. So, we're prepared to forgive Sarah's debt entirely if you're willing to provide us with certain services." "What kind of services?" "Business consulting. We have several legitimate enterprises that could benefit from your expertise." I studied her face, looking for some indication of what she was really after. "You want to hire me?" "In a manner of speaking. We're expanding our operations and need someone with your skills to help us structure our business entities in ways that maximize efficiency and minimize regulatory complications. You want me to help you launder money. I want you to help us optimize our business structures. Everything would be completely legal. And if I refuse?" Carmen's expression hardened. "Then Sarah's deck remains in effect, and we proceed with our original plan." "Which is what exactly?" "Which is that Sarah works for us until her debt is paid off, starting tonight." "Tonight?" "We have a client event this evening. Sarah would be working as a hostess, making sure our guests are comfortable and well cared for." "What kind of client event?" "A private party. Very upscale, very exclusive. The kind of event where attractive young women can earn substantial tips just for being friendly and attentive." I felt sick to my stomach. "You're talking about prostitution." "I'm talking about hospitality services. What happens between consenting adults is none of our business. And if I agree to your business consulting proposal, then Sarah goes home tonight and never hears from us again." "How do I know you'll keep your word?" "Because we're business people, Mr. Martinez. Our reputation depends on honoring our agreements." I stared at Carmen across the table, weighing my options. If I agreed to work for them, I'd be complicit in whatever illegal activities they were involved in. If I refused, they were going to force Sarah into prostitution. Neither option was acceptable. "I need time to think about it," I said. "You have until 6 o'clock tonight. Call this number with your decision." Carmen slid a piece of paper across the table with a phone number written on it. "And if I don't call, then we'll assume you've chosen to let Sarah handle her own problems." Carmen stood up and walked out of the restaurant, leaving me sitting alone at the table with the phone number in my hand. Outside, Tony was waiting by his truck. "Well, they want me to work for them. Business consulting for their money laundering operation. And if you refuse, they force Sarah into prostitution." Tony whistled low under his breath. "These people are serious." "I know. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to call the FBI and hope Agent Chen has a better idea than anything I can come up with." This time, Agent Chen answered on the first ring. "Chen. Agent Chen, this is Mike Martinez. Carmen just contacted me with another ultimatum." "What kind of ultimatum?"
I explained the meeting and Carmen's offer, including the threat to put Sarah to work at a client event that evening. Where is Sarah now? At work, at the coffee shop. I'm sending agents to pick her up and bring her somewhere safe. Don't let her leave that coffee shop until they get there. What about the ultimatum? What about it? Do I call them back? Do I agree to work for them? Absolutely not. These people are done playing games, Mr. Martinez. They're escalating because they feel cornered. That makes them more dangerous, but it also makes them more likely to make mistakes. What kind of mistakes? The kind that give us what we need to arrest them. Agent Chen explained that the FBI had been working around the clock since we'd given them the recording. They'd identified Carmen Rodriguez and Mike Sullivan as suspected members of a criminal organization that operated throughout the Southwest, involved in everything from loan sharking to human trafficking. Human trafficking, forced labor, sexual exploitation, debt bondage. Sarah's situation fits their standard pattern perfectly. They target vulnerable people with addictions or financial problems, get them in debt, then force them to work off that debt in illegal enterprises. How many other victims are there? We're still investigating, but based on what we've uncovered so far, probably dozens, maybe more. And you can arrest them based on the recording I made? We can arrest them based on what we've discovered during our investigation, which was initiated by your recording. You've given us enough to move forward. When? Tonight. We're going to let them set up their client event and then raid it. With any luck, we'll catch them in the act of forcing multiple victims to engage in prostitution. What do you need from me? Nothing. Stay home, keep Sarah safe, and let us handle the rest. I called Sarah and explained that FBI agents were coming to pick her up from work. She was scared, but relieved that the situation was finally going to be resolved. "Where will they take me?" she asked. "Somewhere safe. Agent Chen said they'd keep you in protective custody until the arrests are made." "What about you?" "I'll be fine. Tony's going to stay here with me." "Dad, I'm sorry for all of this, for putting you in danger, for stealing Mom's ring, for everything." "We'll talk about it later. Right now, just focus on staying safe." The agents picked up Sarah 20 minutes later. Agent Chen called to confirm she was in protective custody and to let me know that the raid was scheduled for 8 o'clock that evening. "Do not leave your house," he emphasized. "Do not answer the door for anyone except law enforcement. Do not take any phone calls from unknown numbers. What if Carmen calls asking for my decision? Don't answer. Let it go to voicemail." Tony and I spent the evening watching the news and waiting for updates. At 8:30, Agent Chen called. "We got them. All of them? Carmen, Mike, and 4 other associates. Plus, we rescued 7 victims who were being held at the event location." 7? Young women between the ages of 19 and 25, all being forced to work as prostitutes to pay off various debts. Sarah would have been number 8. I felt a wave of relief so intense that my knees went weak. Is it over? It's over. They're all in custody, and based on what we found tonight, they're going to be in prison for a very long time. Sarah came home the next morning, looking exhausted but relieved. We sat in the kitchen, the same kitchen where this whole nightmare had started, and talked about what came next. "I'm going to stay in treatment," she said. "Dr. Patterson thinks I need at least 6 months of intensive therapy to address the underlying issues that led to my gambling addiction." "Good, that's good. And I want to pay you back for the ring redemption fee, and for the lawyer and the FBI consultation, and everything else this cost you." "Sarah?" "No, Dad, I need to do this. I need to take responsibility for my actions and make amends where I can." "Okay. But you don't have to do it all at once. You can pay me back over time, as you're able." "Thank you." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, both lost in our own thoughts. The ring was back on my finger, where it belonged. Sarah was safe and getting help for her addiction. The people who had threatened us were in jail. But something had changed between us during this ordeal. The dynamic of our relationship had shifted in ways that I was still trying to understand. Sarah had violated my trust in the most fundamental way possible, but she'd also shown real courage in facing her problems and working to make things right. And I had learned something about myself, too. For the past 2.5 years, since Mel died, I'd been operating under the assumption that I could protect Sarah from the world by keeping her close and solving her problems for her, but that approach had actually made her more vulnerable, not less. "I think I need to move out," Sarah said suddenly. "What?" "I need to get my own place, start over, learn how to be independent and responsible without having you there to catch me every time I fall." The idea of Sarah living on her own, especially so soon after everything that had happened, terrified me. But I could see the wisdom in what she was saying. "Where would you go?" "There's a sober living house that Dr. Patterson recommended. It's specifically for people with gambling addictions. Structured environment, supportive community, but still independent living. And you think that's what you need?" "I think it's what I need to get better. Really better, not just temporarily stable." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw someone who was finally ready to grow up. It had taken a crisis to get her there, a brush with something truly dangerous that had forced her to confront the consequences of her choices, but she was there now, ready to do the hard work of recovery. "When would you move?" "Next month, after I've been in treatment for a while longer." "And your job?" "I'm going to quit the coffee shop and find something more stable. Dr. Patterson thinks I should look for work that doesn't involve handling cash, at least for the first year of recovery." We spent the rest of the day making plans and talking about the future. Sarah researched jobs and sober living arrangements, while I worked on accepting the fact that my little girl was finally becoming an adult. That evening, I called Jessica and invited her over for dinner. The three of us cooked together, something simple, just pasta and salad, and talked about normal things, movies we wanted to see, books we were reading, places we wanted to travel. It felt remarkably ordinary after everything we'd been through, but maybe ordinary was exactly what we needed. As I was cleaning up after dinner, I found myself thinking about Mel and what she would have made of this whole situation. She would have been heartbroken about Sarah's addiction, furious about the theft of her ring, and terrified about the threats from Carmen and Mike. But she also would have been proud of how Sarah had ultimately handled herself, proud of her daughter's courage in facing her problems and getting help, proud of her willingness to take responsibility and make amends. And maybe, if I was being honest, she would have been proud of me too, for not giving up on Sarah, for fighting to protect her, for finding a way to solve an impossible problem. I took off the ring and looked at it in the kitchen light. The diamonds still sparkled, the platinum still gleamed. It looked exactly the same as it had 3 days ago, but somehow it felt different, heavier with meaning, more precious for having been lost and found again. I slipped it back onto my finger and finished cleaning the kitchen. 3 months later, Sarah moved into the sober living house. She'd found a job doing data entry for a nonprofit organization. Steady work, regular hours, no cash handling. She attended Gamblers Anonymous meetings 3 times a week and saw Dr. Patterson twice a week for individual therapy. It wasn't easy. There were days when she called me crying, overwhelmed by cravings, or frustrated with the pace of her recovery. There were days when I wanted to drive over there and bring her home, to wrap her in bubble wrap and keep her safe from everything that might hurt her. But I didn't. Instead, I listened when she needed to talk, offered encouragement when she was struggling, and respected her need to fight this battle on her own terms. 6 months after the arrest, Carmen Rodriguez and Mike Sullivan were sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for racketeering, extortion, and human trafficking. Agent Chen called to let me know that our recording had been crucial evidence in securing their convictions. "You should be proud," he said. "Your courage in standing up to these people helped us take down an organization that was destroying lives." I was just protecting my daughter. You were doing more than that. You were protecting everyone they might have victimized in the future. The other 7 women who had been rescued during the raid were all receiving counseling and support services. 3 of them had testified against Carmen and Mike, helping to ensure that they would spend many years behind bars. Sarah had been clean from gambling for 8 months when she finally moved back home. Not permanently. She kept her room at the sober living house, but for a weekend visit that stretched into a week. "I miss this place," she said, sitting at the kitchen table where so much of our story had unfolded. "I missed you. I missed you too. But I needed the time away. I needed to learn how to be responsible for myself." "And have you? Learned that, I mean." Sarah smiled, and for the first time in years, it reached her eyes. "I'm getting there. Some days are harder than others, but yeah, I think I'm getting there." That weekend, we drove out to the cemetery where Mel was buried. We hadn't been there together since the funeral, both of us finding it too painful to face. But something about everything we'd been through had changed our relationship to that grief. Sarah knelt by the headstone and placed a bouquet of yellow roses, Mel's favorite flowers, by the granite marker. "Hi, Mom," she said quietly. "I know I've made a lot of mistakes since you've been gone. I know I disappointed you, and I know I hurt Dad. But I want you to know that I'm getting better.
I'm learning how to live without you and how to honor your memory instead of running away from it." I stood behind her, my hand resting on her shoulder, and felt something shift inside my chest. The pain of losing Mel would never go away completely, but it no longer felt like it was going to crush me. "She would be proud of you," I said. "Do you really think so?" "I know so." We stood there for a long time, father and daughter, saying goodbye to the woman who had shaped both our lives in ways we were still discovering. On the drive home, Sarah brought up something that had been weighing on her mind. "Dad, I've been thinking about what I want to do with my life, long term, I mean." "And?" "I want to help people who are struggling with addiction, maybe become a counselor or work at a treatment center. I know it would mean going back to school, finishing my degree." "I think that's a wonderful idea." "Really? You're not worried about me being around people who might trigger a relapse?" I thought about that for a moment. 6 months ago, the idea of Sarah working with other addicts would have terrified me. But watching her recovery process, seeing how she'd grown and changed, I felt confident that she could handle it. "I think you'd be good at it," I said. "You understand what people are going through in a way that someone who hasn't been there can't." Dr. Patterson said the same thing. She thinks I could make a real difference. "Then you should do it." Sarah enrolled in community college that fall, taking classes part-time while continuing to work and attend her recovery meetings. She moved back into her own apartment, not the sober living house, but a regular place with a roommate who was also in recovery. I helped her move, carrying boxes and furniture up 2 flights of stairs to a small but bright apartment near the college campus. As we unpacked her belongings, I found myself marveling at how different she seemed, more confident, more purposeful, more at peace with herself. "Dad, there's something I want to give you," she said as we were finishing up. She handed me a small wrapped package. Inside was a simple silver picture frame containing a photo of the 3 of us, Sarah, Mel, and me, taken at Sarah's high school graduation. We were all smiling, arms around each other, looking like the picture of a happy American family. "I found this in my stuff from college," Sarah said. "I thought you might want it for your office." I looked at the photo, remembering that day. Mel had been so proud, taking pictures constantly and crying during the ceremony. Sarah had rolled her eyes at her mother's emotional display, but she'd been proud too, excited about the future and all the possibilities that lay ahead. None of us could have imagined where we'd end up, the struggles and pain and mistakes that would come after that moment of pure happiness. But we'd survived it, all of it, and somehow we'd come out the other side still loving each other, still fighting for each other, still committed to building something better from the wreckage of what we'd lost. "Thank you," I said, though the words felt inadequate for what I was feeling. "Thank you for not giving up on me." 2 years later, Sarah graduated from community college with an associate's degree in addiction counseling. I sat in the auditorium watching her walk across the stage, thinking about all the times I'd wondered if this day would ever come.
After the ceremony, we went to dinner at a nice restaurant. Not Rose's Kitchen, which had too many difficult memories associated with it, but a place downtown that specialized in steak and seafood. "I have news," Sarah said over dessert. "Good news, I hope?" "I got the job at the treatment center, the one I interviewed for last week." "Sarah, that's fantastic." "I start Monday. I'll be working with Dr. Patterson, helping to run group therapy sessions for people with gambling addictions." "Are you nervous?" "Terrified," she admitted, "but also excited. I feel like this is what I'm supposed to be doing with my life." I raised my glass of wine. "To new beginnings." "To new beginnings," she echoed, clinking her water glass against mine. We talked about her plans for the job, about the clients she'd be working with, about her hopes for making a difference in people's lives. As I listened to her, I felt a deep sense of pride and gratitude. This was my daughter, not the broken, desperate young woman who had pawned her mother's ring, but the strong, compassionate person she had become through years of hard work and determination. When we got home that night, I went to my dresser and opened the jewelry box where I kept Mel's ring. I'd stopped wearing it regularly months ago, partly because it felt too precious to risk losing, and partly because I'd finally reached a place where I didn't need to carry her with me everywhere I went. But tonight felt special. Tonight felt like a celebration not just of Sarah's graduation and new job, but of everything we'd overcome to get to this point. I slipped the ring onto my finger and walked out to the backyard, where Sarah was sitting on the patio looking up at the stars. "Dad, are you okay?" "I'm fine. Better than fine, actually." I sat down beside her, and we sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood settling down for the night. "Do you ever think about what Mom would say if she could see us now?" Sarah asked. "All the time." "What do you think she'd say?" I thought about that for a moment, trying to imagine Mel's reaction to everything that had happened. Her pride in Sarah's recovery and new career, her relief that we'd survived the crisis with Carmen and Mike, her joy at seeing us closer now than we'd been since she died. I think she'd say she's proud of both of us. Proud of you for fighting your way back from addiction. Proud of me for learning how to let you fight your own battles? Do you think she'd forgive me for what I did with her ring? Honey, I think she forgave you the moment it happened. Your mother's love was never conditional on you being perfect. Sarah started crying then. Not the desperate, broken sobs of 2 years ago, but quiet tears of relief and gratitude. "I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart." We sat there under the Arizona stars, father and daughter, survivors of a storm that had tested every bond between us and somehow made us stronger. The ring on my finger caught the light from the patio lamp, its diamonds sparkling like tiny stars themselves. In the distance, I could hear the sounds of the city. Traffic on the highways, planes taking off from Sky Harbor Airport, the hum of air conditioners working against the desert heat. The sounds of millions of people living their lives, facing their own challenges, fighting their own battles, finding their own ways to heal and grow and forgive. Sarah had been right that day in the kitchen when she said she'd broken her mother's heart. But hearts, I'd learned, are remarkably resilient things. They can break and heal and break again, and somehow keep beating through it all. The ring would always carry the memory of those terrible few days when I thought I'd lost it forever. But it also carried new memories now, of Sarah's courage and recovery, of the strength of our bond as a family, of the possibility of redemption even after the worst mistakes. 3 years later, Sarah met James at a Gamblers Anonymous meeting. He was 5 years into his own recovery from a gambling addiction that had cost him his marriage and his business. They took things slowly, building a friendship first, then gradually allowing it to deepen into something more. I liked James immediately. He was honest about his past mistakes, committed to his recovery, and clearly devoted to Sarah. Most importantly, he understood the work it took to stay clean, and he supported Sarah's continued participation in therapy and support groups. When they got engaged after dating for a year and a half, Sarah asked if she could have her mother's ring for the wedding. "Are you sure?" I asked, After everything that happened? Because of everything that happened, she said. That ring represents more than just Mom's marriage to you. It represents forgiveness and second chances and the kind of love that survives even the worst mistakes. The wedding was small, just family and close friends, held in the backyard of the house where Sarah had grown up. Dr. Patterson officiated, having become licensed to perform marriages specifically so she could officiate for her clients who found love in recovery. As I walked Sarah down the aisle, I caught sight of Mel's ring on her finger, sparkling in the late afternoon sunlight. For a moment, I could almost feel Mel's presence there with us, celebrating this moment of joy and new beginnings. "Take care of her," I told James as I placed Sarah's hand in his. "I will," he promised. "We'll take care of each other." The reception was exactly what Sarah had wanted: simple, heartfelt, focused on celebrating love and family rather than impressing anyone. We danced to music from the playlist Mel had made for Sarah's high school graduation party. We ate cake from the same bakery that had made Sarah's birthday cakes when she was little. We laughed and cried and told stories about the people we've lost and the ones we'd found. During the father-daughter dance, Sarah looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "Thank you for saving me," she whispered. "Thank you," I whispered back. 6 months after the wedding, Sarah and James bought a house in the same neighborhood where I lived. Not because they needed to be close to me, but because they wanted to be. Because we'd learned that family isn't about perfect people making perfect choices. It's about imperfect people choosing to love each other through the imperfections. On Sarah's 30th birthday, she and James threw a party in their backyard. As I watched her laugh with her friends, as I saw the easy affection between her and her husband, as I listened to her talk about her work helping other people recover from addiction, I felt a deep sense of completion. This was what Mel and I had hoped for when Sarah was born. Not that she would never face challenges or make mistakes, but that she would have the strength and support to overcome whatever life threw at her way. The ring on Sarah's finger caught the light as she gestured, and I smiled. Some stories have happy endings, and some stories have complicated endings, and some stories just have endings that feel right. This felt right. Later that evening, after the guests had gone home and James had fallen asleep on the couch, Sarah and I sat on her back porch talking. "I've been thinking about Mom a lot lately," she said. "Any particular reason?" "James and I are trying to have a baby. The news hit me like a physical force, joy and excitement and terror all mixed together. Sarah, that's wonderful." "Is it? I mean, what if I screw up? What if I pass on my addictive tendencies? What if I'm not good enough at taking care of myself to take care of someone else?" "You'll be a wonderful mother." "How can you be so sure?" "Because you've learned how to fight for the people you love. Because you understand that love isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up and doing the work, even when it's hard." Sarah leaned against my shoulder, and I put my arm around her. "I want to name her Melanie if it's a girl, after Mom. She would love that. And if it's a boy, I want to name him Michael, after you." I felt tears sting my eyes. "You don't have to do that." "I want to. You saved my life, Dad."
Both literally and figuratively. If our kids grow up to be half as strong and loving as you are, they'll be lucky. We sat there in comfortable silence, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. In the distance, I could hear the sounds of the neighborhood, dogs barking, televisions playing, families settling down for the night. 7 months later, Sarah gave birth to Melanie Rose Martinez Thompson. She was perfect, 10 fingers, 10 toes, a full head of dark hair that looked exactly like her grandmother's. When the nurse placed her in my arms for the first time, I felt the weight of 3 generations of love and loss and hope. This tiny person would never know her grandmother, but she would grow up hearing stories about her. She would know that she was named after a woman who had fought cancer with grace and dignity. She would know that love is something worth fighting for, even when the odds seem impossible.
As I held my granddaughter, I thought about the ring that had started this whole journey. It was safely at home now, in the jewelry box where Mel had kept it for 20 years. Sarah had insisted on taking it off before going into labor, not wanting to risk losing it in the chaos of childbirth. But the love that ring represented, the commitment to fight for each other, to forgive each other's mistakes, to choose each other over and over again despite the challenges, that love was here in this room. It was in Sarah's exhausted but radiant face as she looked at her daughter. It was in James's gentle hands as he stroked the baby's tiny fingers. It was in my own overwhelming sense of gratitude for this moment, for this family, for this chance to watch the story continue. 2 years later, as I write this story, little Melanie is learning to walk and starting to say her first words. Sarah and James are talking about having another baby. Sarah's work at the treatment center has expanded. She's now the program director for their gambling addiction services, helping dozens of people each year find their way to recovery. I'm still running my consulting business, though I've scaled back to spend more time with my granddaughter. I've also started volunteering with a nonprofit that provides support services to families affected by addiction. Turns out there's a lot I learned during Sarah's recovery that other parents need to hear. The ring sits in its jewelry box most days now, taken out only for special occasions. But its real value was never in the platinum or the diamonds anyway. Its real value was in what it represented. The promise to keep loving someone even when they break your heart. The commitment to keep fighting for them even when they've given up on themselves. Sarah kept that promise. I kept that promise. And now we're teaching Melanie what that kind of love looks like, so that someday, when she faces her own challenges and makes her own mistakes, she'll know that love is stronger than any failure, any addiction, any crisis that might come her way. Some stories are about redemption. Some are about forgiveness. Some are about the power of family to heal even the deepest wounds. This story is about all of those things, but mostly it's about a ring and the unbreakable bond it represents between a father and daughter who learned that love means never giving up on each other, no matter what. Even when everything seems lost, even when trust has been broken, even when the people you love make choices that break your heart, love finds a way. Love always finds a way. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get the chance to see that love passed down to the next generation, bright and shining and full of promise for whatever comes next.